So can you explain to me why you chose to be a firefighter?
That's a tough decision. I was looking for a job at the time. I wanted a steady career, and I had some friends that were in the firefighting business in different places. So I applied for Lee Summit, and I was rejected twice before I was finally hired, and that was in 1988.
Does it run in the family? Because I know that your son's a firefighter too.
That's true, but actually law enforcement runs in the family. My father was a highway patrol officer, and I have a cousin that's Kansas City police officer. Both have retired.
So I'm actually going to move this just so I can see it to
Okay.
make sure nothing goes wrong. Okay. What kind of impact does being a firefighter have on your life?
I think it has a big impact. One is on your family life. My wife Carol had to get used to me being gone 24 hours at a time. So a third of the year I was not home. So that's an impact family-wise. Impact on me was seeing things that you don't usually see. And some are good and some are bad. And it was just adjusting to that.
Okay. So you spent a lot of time away from your family?
Yeah, a third of the time, yes.
How does that work, especially if you're trying to, were you raising a son at the time?
Not when we started this. You know, Justin came into our life later. I was used to this kind of life because my dad being in law enforcement, he wasn't always there at Christmas or anything either. So I was more used to it. Carol adapted very nicely, and it worked out fine for us.
Good. So is there a lot of stress that comes along with being a firefighter?
Sometimes there is, sometimes it's not. I mean, you spend so much time at work, they become a second family. Everybody are there because you're spending 24 hours, you eat with them, everybody sleeps there and all that.
Okay, so just to get more deep into being a firefighter, can you describe to me your most memorable call?
Probably one of my most memorable calls was a large fire on 150. I was stationed at the station on 150 at the time, and we got there, and this big, very large house is fully involved, out the windows, and I was fairly new, probably a year or two, and I was just amazed at what was going on, and there was just three of us there. And that turned out to be a big deal because the person that owned the house, it was accused of arson and eventually went to prison. So it turned out to be a big deal.
What do you think when you see, like when you approach a house like that and you see that it's just in flames?
In Lee Summit, since it would be very hard for a house to get that well involved, my first thing, and this is just from being a firefighter probably, is that somebody set it. Because accidental fires take 3 or 4 minutes to really get going, where an on-purpose fire takes like 30 seconds.
What is it like going into a fire? Like, what do you think while you're in there?
Well, you're thinking about, I need to find the fire and they need to be safe. So you're sounding the floor because it's like having your eyes shut. It's very dark. It's not always real hot, but the closer you get to fire, the hotter it gets. You stay low, so the temperature will stay between 300 and 400 degrees. And if you stand up, it gets as high as 1400 degrees.
Wow.
That's why firefighters go in staying low.
Does that take a toll on your health at all?
Probably, but the adrenaline is so high that those things don't matter. I think it's akin to people that like to race cars or anything else that's kind of, once it gets in your blood, it's a challenge to make sure if you can do it again. And you want to beat the fire. It just becomes pretty simple. It's not, but it becomes simple.
So can you explain to me what it's like knowing you have the ability to save someone's life?
It feels really good when you do that, and it's not always successful, but it feels really good to know that you can make a difference.
Have you ever had an experience like that?
Yes.
And was it successful?
Yes. I've had lots of experience over 26 years as far as that. And the best experience I ever had was a gentleman that was mowing his yard, and he had a heart attack and went into cardiac arrest. We got there and we did CPR and all the things that you do, and we went to the hospital. And the biggest thrill of that was him looking at me and saying, "My chest hurts because of you." Yep, that was true.
How do you cope with knowing that you can't always save someone's life?
you just, I don't know. I can't answer that question. You just do. And some people can't, and that's why they're not firefighters. And some are, and that's why they are. But that's the same. In Lee Summit, we are the ambulance and the fire service both. So even the EMTs in other places besides Lee Summit, they're dealing with the same thing also. And it's difficult. You got to realize that it's not your fault, and you're there to help.
Okay. So does your job, even though it's stressful, is it still rewarding?
Absolutely. Yeah. It was, I wouldn't trade it for anything. It's the best thing I ever did, except marrying Carol.
Can you explain like how it feels like that, even though it's stressful and rewarding?
It's, I would have to relate it to similar to if you're playing football, baseball, wrestling, volleyball, whatever your sport is, when you win, that feeling you get when you win. And that's the feeling you get when you win. You also get the feeling when you lose. But it's real similar to that to me. It's like, it's a victory when you win. And it's not so much the defeat when you lose, it's just what can I learn from that to get better next time.
That's amazing. So now to switch over to 9/11.
Okay.
Even most high school students, as a senior, I was still 3 when it happened.
Right.
So it's been so long and I really don't remember it. So
Sure.
Can you explain what happened on September 1st or September 11th?
It was shocking. I mean, it was like, I never thought that somebody would be, in my opinion, stupid enough to attack America. And I was home that morning, and one of my friends at work goes, "Have you turned on the TV?" And I hadn't. And I'm watching it, and I sat there, I just couldn't believe what was happening. I mean, and of course, I was thinking, along with a lot of the country, that this is worse because things are happening in other places. Things are happening, you know, they're saying there's something going to the White House, to the Pentagon. We know the towers have been hit twice. So you really don't know what's happening. So it was a whole different experience that I had never had.
And you were at work at the time?
No, I was here.
Oh, okay.
I was in this house watching a TV in here. And my friend who was at work that day called and told me. And I ended up going to work that day.
Is it one of those days that you can still remember perfectly in your mind?
Yeah. It goes along with when I was very young, in first or second grade, Kennedy was killed. I remember where I was then, and this is like that. Yeah. I know where I was, what I was doing. I was sitting right in there watching that television. To be real honest, I think I was in my underwear, because I think Sean called me when I was in bed. So I was just glued to the TV.
Okay, so what does that day mean to you?
Well, it's a day to remember everyone that died, and that we should always be aware of our surroundings, not only locally or right here, but everywhere and in the country. And we ought to make sure we always have a good defense and that we can stand up, because that just shows that a few crazy people can cause a lot of damage.
Okay. Can you describe to me what you felt as you were finding out about what was happening in New York?
I was mad.
Why were you mad and not, scared, like most people?
No, I think I just wanted to go, I don't know for sure. I was mad.
Was part of you as a firefighter, were you wishing that you could be there to help?
Yes.
Okay. How did you and your fellow firemen react to it?
Well, you have to continue doing your job. A lot of things changed that day, but a lot of things stayed the same. We're still got all the emergency calls that we have to do. They have to happen that day, just like always. It started us being more aware of our surroundings. Things that we used to just take for granted, like getting out of a fire truck and going in the grocery store to get groceries. We now had to leave somebody with the fire truck to secure it. At certain calls, we had to secure fire trucks and ambulances, things that we never thought about before. We just hop out of the fire truck, hop out of the ambulance, and go do our job and come back. But now, and also as firefighters, we always try to be friendly, so we always had our doors up the station. Kids come in, we had to shut our doors, because now we're not sure who's who, what's going to happen. You know, they're going to try to bomb anything, which it turned out not to be a huge thing there. But for the first couple of years, you don't know what's going to happen. So you're planning for the worst. You know, we spent most of our training at for EMS and fire, hazmat, stuff like that, and all of a sudden we're going to training about improvised explosive devices and stuff like this, how to deal with terrorists. That was never part of the training in firefighter when I started.
So your job definitely changed after that day.
Yeah.
Did a lot of people cope with the change?
Yeah, and it was tough because, you know, the attitude of most firefighters, male, female, whoever, is we're tough, come get us, we don't care. But you can't function that way. You know, we want to leave the doors open, we want to leave the truck, come on, if you think you're bad, come get us. But fortunately, there were cooler heads out there that prevailed, and we adapted.
Okay. How do you think 9/11 impacted you differently because of your occupation?
Well, I'd have to go back to the training. We started doing a lot of training about terrorism, explosive devices, things that we didn't do before. And then everything that happened, you're wondering if it's a terrorist act or if you're trying to determine what's what. Because the day of 9/11, at first it just seemed like, well, something happened to a plane, and then all of a sudden, wait a minute, something's going on. So now everything got looked at under a microscope.
And that probably is different, like if you would have just been doing a regular job, would you say?
Yeah, I think so. And I think for police and fire and some other professions, the difference was what I'm talking about, training, awareness, and that. But yet, if I was working at the grocery store selling cars or things like that, I went back to work and probably didn't change that much. I mean, hopefully I'd been more aware of my surroundings, but I wouldn't have been training to deal with a terrorist act.
So even years after the event, how does 9/11 impact your job?
Well, I think it impacts the job, just like I said. Training goes on and things we don't expect to happen, like trains that come through Lee Summit. There's a lot of training going on that as we speak, because that's a target, that's hazmat. If they can hit one of those trains in Lee Summit, you could kill a lot of people and cause a hazardous spill that would affect thousands and thousands. So that things like that every day are being thought of and trained on to hopefully prevent it. And if it does happen, how do we contain it and minimize its effect?
So would you say that most of your training now is to prevent, or what to do in case of an attack?
No. A lot of it is, I'd say probably 20%. But still mainly EMS is the primary function of the Lee Summit Fire Department. It's, we do 90% emergency medical service and ambulance, 80%, excuse me. And then the rest is fires, motor vehicle accidents, and terrorism, and, you know, improvised explosive device training, stuff like that, along with the police department.
Okay. So was there a time that you ever thought, after 9/11 happened, that you ever thought, this job's too dangerous, I can't do this?
No.
What did you think the opposite, if anything?
Yeah, I was. I love the job. I like helping people, and I like being on the good guys team. And that's just what it is.
Do you think it's worth the risk?
Yes. Somebody has to do these things, and we do a lot of training to make sure that you don't get hurt. Now you do. It's just part of the job, but you try to minimize that. You know, and yeah, it's very rewarding, and like I say, somebody has to do it, and I didn't think as a young man that's what I'd want to do, but it turned out it is. So.
Why did you decide that you wanted to be the person to do that?
I was looking for a challenge, and I like to say, I was looking for a job, and then talking to some people who were about that, it was a challenge. And I teetered on the law enforcement part, but I really thought that I would get more enjoyment out of this. I'll never know, because I did this and I like it.
That's amazing that you found something you love, though.
Oh, I did. I love it. Yeah.
So can you describe what the recovery was like for the firefighters? Because I can't even imagine what it's like knowing that could have been you in the building.
Yeah, and a lot of it is you deal with it and you have people come in and talk to you about what's going on and just mental health. And we have people that specialize in that to come in to talk to you about what's happened and not why, because nobody knew why, but and what you can do to help. When sometimes what you can do to help is just do your job. It's not run out there and help. It's just to do what you're supposed to do.
Okay. What was the recovery like for the nation?
I think the nation's still recovering. A lot of things changed, and they're never going to go back. You know, it used to be very easy to fly. It used to be very easy to do a lot of things, and now it's very difficult. You're searched a lot. You know, I'm not saying it's unnecessary, but things have changed. And I think we may have recovered as far as we're okay day to day, but for people that are my age and older, we're still mad because we have to do all this stuff because of terrorists. Not because of us or most of the people in this country. We're doing it because of a few idiots. And I understand you have to do it, but it still makes you mad.
What do you think the emotional impact was on the nation?
Well, I think a lot, because a lot of people were affected because many people died, not just firefighters or police, and the people working in that building. There were like 3,000 people that died. And, you know, somebody, you know, they all had a multitude of family and friends, and it's huge, and even if you don't know them, you're thinking how terrible it was. And I can't even imagine being in that position.
Yeah. Would you say that we've stayed in the phase of recovery, or have we gone back to the way we were before 9/11?
Some people probably have went back, but we have learned from it, and many things have changed, like I talked about earlier. And I think that had to happen. So I don't think we're done. I think that there's still more things that will be done eventually. And like I said, we have to keep vigilance and make sure that we're strong enough as a country not to let this happen anymore.
Even though it's kind of thought as one of the worst days in history, do you think it's impacted our nation for the better?
You know, I don't know. I think for the most part, yes. I think it's made us aware of what can happen, and it's made us aware of how to stop it or try to stop it. I don't know that you can always guarantee it. For that part, I absolutely say yes. On the other side, I don't like what it did to people. To just normal things, like when you get a license or all this, you know, things are so much more difficult for everybody. That part I don't like, but I understand. The other part I do like, that it opened our eyes to go, wow, 18 guys can screw everything up, you know.
Yeah. Okay, so this is kind of the last subject.
Sure.
So as the years go by, schools talk about 9/11 less and less. How do you think schools can still be teaching their students the importance of this event?
And, you know, there's lots of video of what happened, and it can be condensed down into a usable form to explain what happened. And I think we have to look at the people that did it and explain what their views are. I mean, 9/11 does nothing if we don't understand why they did what they did. You know, they did it because they hate us. Okay, we have to figure out why they hate us. And we have to work that out, however that is. And I don't have that answer. If I did, I'd be running for president, but I'm not. So.
How do you think we can explain it, though, to... I know in our high school, it's the first year that we have students who weren't born yet.
Right.
And it's hard to imagine that.
It is.
How do you think we can explain, I mean, one of the most important days in our history to these students?
Well, I think, one, students today are very visual. So I go back to the video part, condense it down and show them what the president had to do, what the military did, all the things of how important, and they closed down the skies over the United States. That's never happened since.
Yeah.
I mean, they grounded every plane where it was. They didn't get to go where they were going. They went down. The only plane in the air was Air Force One. That was it. And it was being escorted by F-15s. So there's 3 or 4 other planes in the whole United States. I think when you put that into perspective of how many planes are in the air right now, and I don't know, I'm going to guess, but there's 8,000 or 9,000.
Oh, yeah.
At least. There's none. That's how big this was. I mean, they closed it down. and just it was. I can't explain it any really more. And it was play by play. This was happening live on television as it was. And you know, I'm old enough to have went through some other disasters, and I was a young person during Vietnam. But that stuff you just saw at 6 o'clock for like 2 minutes during the 6 o'clock news, because that's all there was. And it was terrible, but it was just that 2-minute glimpse. Well, this one, it was there all the time. And I mean, I'm not saying they should sit down and watch the 8 or 9 hours of live first day coverage, but there's a lot of that really hits. The planes hitting the towers, the people falling out, jumping out because they're burning. People jumped out all day. There's video of all of it. You know, because they thought it'd be better to hit the ground 800 feet down than burn to death. That's a tough decision to have to make. I think if you see that.
Yeah. What part of 9/11 impacted you the most?
Probably just the job, the training part, and I knew nothing about terrorist bombs and all this stuff. That was for the police. And then all of a sudden we're having to learn this. And then the good thing is being aware of my surroundings. I probably was like most people. I knew where I was going and I could see where I was going, but I didn't know what was happening over here. That changed me to where I want to know what's going on all the time around me that I can see.
Do you think our nation is going to remember 9/11 forever?
Yes.
And
I
why?
think it will have the kind of impact because our country has only been attacked twice. The Japanese attacked it, and these idiots. That's it.
Okay, that's all I have. Thank you so much for doing this.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
It's just been really nice to listen. It's about from someone's point of view who really remembers it.
Okay.
Is there anything else that you would like to add? I mean, if I knew anything more about, like, your background as a firefighter, or?
No, I mean, yeah, my background is, you know, I actually started out as a dispatcher at the fire department, and then moved up through the ranks. And through my career, I had held every rank in the Lee's Summit Fire Department except one. And I was the chief of the department. So I've been in every position.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it was fun. It was a good ride. And now that's what Justin does. He works there now. So.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
It's fun to see your son follow in your footsteps.
It was cool. It was cool.